This week on the WriterCon podcast,
I would say what has helped me for sure to continually assess is know why you're writing.
Welcome to WriterCon, a gathering place for writers to share their knowledge about writing and the writing world. Your hosts are William Bernhardt, best-selling novelist and author of the Red Sneaker books on writing, and Lara Bernhardt, award-winning author of the Wantland Files book series.
Thank you, Jesse Ulrich. And hey there, writers. Thanks for joining us. As this podcast is being released, we're just a few days away from embarking on the WriterCon cruise. Of course, regular listeners may recall that Lara told us like a month and a half ago that she was already packing her bag. You got that bag ready yet, honey?
Well, when I had that kind of impromptu trip to New York, it disrupted my cruise packing. But I have most of my outfits kind of picked up and hanging, ready to go back into the bag. So I'm super close.
Fabulous. And Jesse, you're coming on the cruise. You're going to speak on audiobooks and podcasts and other related matters. And your wife, Michelle, is coming to the writer sessions, right?
That's correct.
Do you think you can handle another cruise
again,
close to the heels of the Star Trek cruise?
It sounds weird because I'm there and I'm working and I'm talking to people about the work I do, but it is so much more relaxing for me being on the WriterCon cruise and the Star Trek cruise because I'm not going to the writers panels, so I have a lot of time to kill. I learned a lot about Royal Caribbean ships from watching their shows on the TV. I'm going to try to get out of my room a little more this time. So
that sounds reasonable.
There's lots to do. There's lots of fun stuff to do.
There is. I'm going to do all the slides. Hopefully it won't be as windy as last time. And,
and we're going to do an episode of the podcast.
We are going to do an episode of the podcast. Right? I'm very excited because I learned how to use both. This is overly complicated, but I have two sets of Rode Wireless Go's, and I've discovered I can plug both of the receivers into my computers, meaning I can have 4 wireless lav mics going at the same time, which means for
everybody.
Yeah, for our audience, the watching now who have watched the cruise one, you didn't see me because I edited it out, but I was constantly taking microphones off people and putting it on. This will be a lot smoother. I'm very much looking forward to that.
Well, I am too now. Holy smokes. All right, our guest today is Stephanie Dooley, who writes as S.L. Dooley. She's the award-winning author of the Portal Slayer trilogy, and she has a new book out, not in the trilogy, but still wonderful, called The Cold Moon Carnival. This is the exciting conclusion to her fantasy duology. That means 2 books, right, Jesse?
Yes.
Duology. It started last year with the release of The Summertime Circus. These stories blend magic and adventure and family in a race against time. We'll talk to her about all this and more, but first, the news. Well, here's a headline you probably never expected to hear leading off our news section on the WriterCon podcast. But here it is, the headline, Poetry Had a Great Year. I should have mentioned this back when we were doing our year-end wrap-up, but I don't know, maybe some of you might not have noticed, but in 2023, this is accurate, the poetry market had its biggest year since Accurate Records began. That was in part boosted by pop stars releasing poetry books and, of course, the Instapoets space with people like Rupi Kaur. Plus, there was a new and groundbreaking translation of Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey, which is also poetry. And so it was a terrific year for poetry. The past 8 years, it's been more spotty. We had the Instapoet craze, which, of course, was basically kickstarted by Rupi Kaur. Her book, Milk and Honey, came out in 2015, and it's been selling well ever since. I mean, I've seen it at malls, at the stores Katie takes me to, Francesca's and whatnot. And if it's at the mall, it's popular. She is Indian by birth, but Canadian, and has sold a lot of books. According to Bookscan, she is the 4th best-selling poet I mean, lifetime achievement totals since BookScan started keeping numbers. She is trailing only Ted Hughes, former ex of Sylvia Plath, later British poet laureate, Pam Ayres, and Seamus Heaney, who's fairly recently passed, but when he was alive, people said he was the greatest living poet. Milk and Honey has never been out of the top 5 of poetry books. It's done exceptionally well. And there are others. There are new people like Donna Ashworth, who's got a great book called History Will Remember When the Work Stopped. And I mentioned pop stars. I'm thinking of Lana Del Rey, music recording artist. I've got one of her records, although I don't think it's behind your head right at the moment, Lara, but it could be because we've got it. Anyway, she published a book called Violet Bent Backwards Over the Grass back in 2020, and that's been a huge hit. Emily Wilson is the woman who did the Homer translations. And between all that and hold your breath for this, Rupi Kaur has actually appeared on The Tonight Show. Wow. Poetry is more successful than it has ever been, certainly since the 18th century or 19th, I'm going to say. Lara, is it possible one day writing poetry could actually be profitable?
Well, it is right now for Rupi Kaur.
I mean,
boy, I'm gonna develop a reputation of being the Debbie Downer, but I think it always seems to me that there are people who do manage to break out and things do very well for them, and then anyone who comes behind and tries to follow in those footsteps or mimic that popularity never quite catch on quite as well. So it is for them, and I'm so happy about that. I love that they have brought poetry to the forefront. We're big fans, that we wrote poetry to each other when we first started dating, and
some of that's in one of my books. But
yes, anyway. I still have mine. Yes,
I have 3 books of poetry, and none of them made the list. Oddly enough, during poetry's biggest year, I don't know what's
tough. So the breakouts, the celebrities, people who already have an audience. Seem to continue to find that success.
Well, Jesse's put up a picture of one of Rupi Kaur's works because I think not everyone is completely familiar with what she's doing, which is a little bit different. I hope she doesn't mind us showing this, but Instagram is typically visual. It's people posting photographs. But what she has done is illustrated her poems, which are usually relatively short and not particularly mysterious. I'm not saying they don't
very
have
touching
profundity. Yeah.
Let me just say, I am actually a huge fan of hers, and I do follow her on Instagram. I love what she writes, and it's very, very women focused.
Yeah. Well, but it's not the sort of thing you're going to read and think, I don't even understand what that was about. It's accessible.
True. Yes. It's very relatable.
Jesse, I see you more as somebody who's staying up late at night, doom scrolling, or maybe just sensitive scrolling poetry on your phone late at night. Am I right about this?
I've always I have an appreciation for poetry. Okay. I have an understanding of like what makes a poem easy to read, what makes a poem difficult to read, what makes a poem worth reading. And I do think there is, especially in our very social media focused world, there is a talent to writing things in short little bursts. And so I do think this is a talent that up until recently people had, that there was no way to make money off it.
Right.
And now maybe there is. So I'm excited for this sort of new, a sort of new avenue for poetry. I would love if poetry like came back big. Poetry is awesome. It's just not like our society was designed to force us sort of to not enjoy or want to read poetry.
Right.
Like, let's bring it back. So it's
right.
It'll be retro.
Instead of English class, or Billy Collins once said, where he just wants to talk about poetry, but the students want to tie it to a chair and beat it to death. Like, what does this mean?
Yeah,
just enjoy it.
Listen, just let's all wait for Taylor Swift to release a poetry book, and then poetry will be.
There we go. That would work.
Yep. So
see, that's what I'm saying. She would definitely have success as a poet.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just a matter of time. All right, news story number 2. This has to do with the author J.D. Barker, who made a request of book talk influencers that some felt was, what's the word, creepy. He has apologized since, to his credit. Let me explain what happened from the top. So author J.D. Barker, very successful, is apologizing for a January 26 email pitch in which he invited a number of high-profile influencers, most of them young women, but of course, that's most of the book talk influencers, right? Anyway, he was trying to get his new book promoted and suggested some, using his word, racy sponsored content to promote it. It went on to ask influencers to create original content to promote this book. It's called Behind a Closed Door. He offered a fee. There's a tiered scale of how many followers they have translates into so much money. But in order to be approved, the posts had to include the book's cover image, some specific hashtags, and they were encouraged to, again, quote, let creativity rule and embrace the fact that, quote, this book is spicy. He also offered a few video ideas, which the email purported to be, quote, currently in the works by other influencers. Some of these ideas included a video with, quote, a camera pan up or down the body using only the book to cover up your naughty bits, end quote. Or a video about, quote, the most taboo place you've ever had sex, end quote. A number of the TikTok influencers aired their grievances, and in the aftermath, Barker has been dropped by his agent. His publisher is being quiet. They're apparently on the fence or something, but anyway. So one book talk user said, this is a quote, I just got such a predatory email from an author wanting me to promote their book. This is creepy as F behavior, and I'm honestly so grossed out. To his credit, Barker has insisted that the initial email was not issued by him or approved by him, but, quote, sent by one of the many PR firms I hired to promote my latest title, end quote. The problem with that is that it doesn't mention that Barker is a co-founder of that PR firm. But he has, I think, understood that maybe this wasn't the best way to do things and has apologized. So, Lara, are you inclined to attribute this to cluelessness or poor oversight or book marketing gone very wrong or what?
All of the above. I see all of that. Like, I completely understand the urge to want to get picked up by influencers, even though
Colleen Hoover.
Sure, but I also kind of hate that. Just like we don't want to pay for reviews or pay, but we do pay for advertising, and you could see that this is kind of a means of paying for advertising. I don't know. It's a tough market, and I understand the idea. And
well, explain it to me, because as I mentioned, most book talk influencers are young women, but their audience is mostly young women too, right? So who's going to want to see this video where the book is covering up their, quote, naughty bits?
Right.
Who's the target for that?
So I think that's your book marketing gone very wrong. Prong of the 3-pronged issue with this whole idea. You're exactly right. How's this going to... This just isn't how you sell romance to young women.
Right. Okay, Jesse. So if... just say anyone, we won't name any names, but if someone offered you money to hold up their book in a suggestive way, maybe somebody who writes legal thrillers or a woman who writes ghost stories, would you be willing to do it?
I mean, would I do it? 100%. No, I mean,
you should ask about the pay scale, but
yes, I should ask, how much I get paid first. No, I mean, like, this definitely sounds like, I mean, yes, he probably should have made it more clear that he was involved, like, a co-owner of the PR company. But this really does seem like a PR thing just gone haywire, where like they were just so desperate to get on Book Talk. They were like, all right, these are all the things that we think will work. And they really should have like been more in conversation with these Book Talk influencers and less like do these things.
Yeah.
I like that idea. Yes.
Right. But it does feel, especially if I imagine the people writing these messages were men writing to these young women, like, this is why you want like a diverse group of people to work with, because someone probably would have flagged this and be like, hey, maybe this is going to come off creepy. Like everyone has a digital voice, right? And it took me a couple of years working in offices to discover that like when I was frustrated or rushed, I had what I called a asshole email voice, where I was just trying to be concise, but it came off sounding very mean. And I think a lot of times it's just like having someone else look these things over and like think about it before sending.
That's an excellent point. Right? Yes.
Very good point.
Which, if it's true, it got sent out before it was done. That's precisely what happened here.
Yeah. Probably someone who's not in a PR firm that you partly founded and own, I'm thinking would be the best place to go.
Yeah. I bet that put even more pressure on them to get, I mean, like, like the sort of the non-spoken pressure that you would have if the co-owner of your company who pays you money is like, we want this on Book Talk. You're like, all right, well, I'll do it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I apologize for that question, Jesse. I was just trying to come up with a question as creepy as this PR request.
Listen, I'm a grown-up white man. Like I have different responses to creepiness than the very fantastic women of Book Talk.
I'll just go ahead and tell you, I'm not an influencer by any means, but if someone sent me an email asking me if I would take a video of myself basically naked with just their book covering up my naughty bits.
Yeah. See, Bill, it's not fair for you to ask me that question.
Bits.
Yeah. Because like, you're one of my clients.
That's a British thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It does sound British.
Yeah. It's the guy British. Yeah. But no, like I do anything for my clients. Offensive. So you asking me to do that, I'm like, sure. There's a power imbalance here.
And that's the way of the publishing world this week. Jesse, let's talk to S.L. Dooley. Steph, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, traditional first question on this podcast. You probably know it already. If you could offer writers one piece of advice, what would it be?
There is so much out there, probably too much, but I would say what has helped me for sure to continually assess is know why you're writing. It's different for everyone, but I think it's important to keep that kind of front of mind just throughout your career.
Mm-hmm. Well, then the obvious follow-up would be, why are you writing?
Yeah. So we went there. No, it's a fair question, and certainly has changed over the seasons. Early on, I was writing just to process, my own, mental health and writing for kids, and it's evolved over time. But for the most part, I would say that it is always first and foremost, I write for God. And so that has maintained a constant. But I would say right now I'm writing for kind of the disillusioned millennials. And I keep that particular reader right out front.
That's a big target audience. So I think that should work.
Yes.
Am I right in thinking your most recent book is The Cold Moon Carnival, right?
Yes, that came out on Leap Day. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, tell us about that.
Oh, wow. So that is the follow-up for the Summertime Circus. So it's a duology. The series or the duology is complete now. And so it finished up that story. But I just really wanted to do my main bread and butter is portal fantasy, but I wanted to do something completely different, high fantasy, elves, dragons, the whole thing. So that was kind of, I just had fun with it. It was like being in a playground. It was a lot of fun.
You've got a big surprise in this book, which apparently, or I have read, comes from your RPG gaming. And I love games, not necessarily role-playing games, but I love games. So I have to ask, what is this? Without giving away this surprise, can you get us part way there?
Absolutely. So it's already up on YouTube. Twisted Tabletop produced it's a three series campaign that we did based in the story world. So it brings in the history. So it goes way back. But yeah, and that's kind of all I can say without, giving away some of the surprise in the story, particularly for those who were, did the campaign with me. I'm excited to see their reaction to what they'll find and some of those crossovers. But I love dabbling in different media, especially when you're in the story, and bringing those different elements in.
So you're saying these were like role-playing manuals so people could play in your world? Am I understanding this right?
Well, this was a campaign that we actually recorded. So I'm actually one of the players, and then there were three other players
acting it out.
It is literally like Dungeons and Dragons. It's role playing, and you have someone who is leading, and it was intimidating. It was the first time I'd ever done role playing, and it's recorded, and so I felt like a lot of pressure, to be on all the time.
Oh, I bet you were great.
It was fun.
You mentioned dragons, and I understand that you have dragon wars in your book. Are dragons just mandatory in fantasy fiction now?
It definitely, I wouldn't say mandatory, but, and not all fantasy have them, but you can see the readers perk up when you find out there's dragons in the story.
I kind of feel like it's become a genre expectation, honestly. I mean, Lord of the Rings kind of is held up as like the premium fantasy novel. And of course we have Smog in that. So I feel like it is kind of an expectation.
Yeah, for sure. And that was even in my Portal fantasies. We have some nods toward dragon lore and things like that. So yeah,
nice.
It's fun.
Yeah.
Maybe since there might be other people my age, maybe you should explain what Portal fantasy is.
Right. So Portal fantasy, of course, there's so many you don't even think of being Portal fantasy. Like, for example, Harry Potter is technically a Portal fantasy.
Because they take the train to Hogwarts?
Exactly. You're going through 9 3/4. You're entering into a whole different world. There's some layering in some of that, which brings in some urban fantasy elements as well. So with my Portal fantasy, we're literally dealing the trilogy that my very first books that came out are called Portal Slayer. So it's very it's not just a suggestion. It is an actual portal that have to be closed. So it's taking people from our world and things that are familiar to us, and then dropping them into whatever different world it is. So it could be an actual portal. It could be something different.
Okay.
I love Portal fantasy. I think it's so fun to think about. It's almost like an alternate universe. It's there, but just out of sight. I love it.
Yes, exactly.
Your author bio says you collect old books and new journals. Can you tell us about that hobby?
Well, yes. So we love to travel. My husband and I, and when the kids were at home, we traveled as family. And that was kind of a criteria that we always found the local antique or vintage bookstore, used bookstore. And we would literally go in and scatter for who could find the oldest book in the store.
Oh, fun.
It was a blast. And so we always had to leave room in our suitcases for whatever books we came home with. So that's the old book. And I still do. I love going to old vintage bookstores just because the stories themselves, and I do read a lot of them, not all of them, but just the books are just beautiful. They represent so much history. So I just love owning them. And then new journals, I have probably hundreds of them, and most of them only half written in because I'm ready for the next new one before I can ever complete them.
If a journal is too nice, I won't write in it. And it makes Bill crazy. He's like, it's meant to be written in. I'm like, but it's so beautiful. I want to just preserve it. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I have a very old copy of Alice in Wonderland that I got the exact same way. I just happened to be in an old vintage bookstore and there it was. And it called to me. I still have it.
Oh, that's awesome. See, that's the kind of like little nuggets of gold that I'm looking for is something that a lot of it you don't recognize, but when you find the ones that the Mark Twain, it's just,
yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I've heard you talk about a lot of story ideas, not just dragons, but all kinds. What do you do? Where do you get ideas, or how do you spark ideas when you're trying to write?
Wow. I wish I could
maybe you don't need to. Do they just come? Or
I know that, it seems like authors either never have this problem or struggle with it. There's not like a happy medium where it's like, when the time comes, I tend to happen upon I have so many ideas written down and so many stories that I just wonder sometimes if I'll be able to write them all in my lifetime. I don't know, spawn out of nowhere.
Steph, I think we're writing soul sisters, honestly, because I'm the same way. I often get asked, well, what do you do when you have writer's block? And like you, I'm like, I know people talk about having this problem, but I'm usually just fighting for time to write. So I kind of get that. 100%. Have you ever encountered a time when you had trouble, you felt stuck? Did you have to do something to move forward?
The only time I ever feel really stuck is during the editing process. That is not my, that's where I really struggle to like sit down, work through it. I want to start with the new ideas, the fresh and shiny, but I don't know about you, but I don't know. I usually am juggling a couple of different projects at one time.
I have done that, and I am doing it right now.
Yes. So I can usually if I do, I'm like stuck a little bit, then I'll just go to the other short story that I'm writing, or I've got a couple of anthologies that I'm writing some short stories for. So, I always have something to keep me busy.
I just need to take a bath. The second I get into the water and sit back and relax, it's like, there it is. Now I know what I need to do.
Ah, that's a good idea. Okay. I'll have to tuck that one away. I like that.
How did you get started writing?
It was kind of maybe a two-stage. First, I always have. I've always, even since as soon as I was able to understand story, I was writing stories. But as you get older, some of that magic dwindles a bit. And so when I started college, I started as pre-med. And I didn't do real well. And I think it's because I was trying to be something that I wasn't. And so, once I found, the English department and found my kindred souls, it was off to the races.
Fantastic. All right. This is another traditional question that we ask our guests. Are you a pantser or a planner? So do you work from an outline or do you write from the seat of your pants?
So I wish I don't have like an easy answer to that. I would love to just say, oh, I'm a pantser and the story just comes. I do usually start with a very loose outline. I don't do a real hard firm one. And I know there are people who like, once their outline's done, most of the book is written, right? And that's nothing like what I do, but I look at it as more kind of a sedimentary writing where I go through from beginning to end, usually pantsing along the way, that I start with the plot. So not a lot of characterization. Some of the other elements are very rudimentary. And then I build on that. So then the characters and the characterization starts, and then setting, gets some of its window dressing. So I kind of come at it from, I take so many different layers to get the story written.
Oh, that makes total sense to me. I do. I work from that outline, but there's going to always be development as I start writing it, and the themes become clear to me, and I've got the recurring motifs and whatnot. So
100%. Yeah.
What is a typical writing day look like for you? Like, what's your process? Do you have special time that you're able to set aside, or are you kind of...
Right. So, oh gosh, and that is one thing I think I'm still learning, or I feel like I had a season for it and it's kind of exploded a bit. I'm not a morning person, so it has to be in the afternoon. And so that time has to be guarded so carefully, because by the time I'm ready to write and I feel primed, everything else in the whole world is happening,
Yeah, sure.
So I do have to protect that time really, really carefully. But there have been times where, 3:00 in the morning, I wake up and I have the luxury of just being able to get up and just, I don't even have a notepad. I just get up and I go and write it, or I'll forget it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Smart.
Wow.
Well, we've talked about Cold Moon Carnival, which is just out. What's next from you?
So I am back to the Portal Slayer story world. So getting back to my original, it's a different land that we're entering, but it's still got, we'll see a few of the same characters, which has been wonderful. I've loved when you finish, especially a trilogy, you're so tired of, I just want to get away from all of those characters. I'm so tired of dealing with them, but it's been nice to see them again. It's like old friends coming back and saying, okay, we're going to do this story again. So Haunted is the name of the trilogy that's coming up. Into the Abyss is the first one, and that'll be coming out, in about 60 days. So,
oh wow.
Yeah. I'm
good on you.
Yeah. It's coming up way quick.
Well, we really will have to get you back then in 60 days or sometime at any rate.
That'd be lovely. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Parting words. Last time I, of course, mentioned the Fall WriterCon conference over Labor Day weekend, because I want you to sign up now and take advantage of the early bird prices, which will not be around much longer. But we also have a small group retreat coming up in Branson. Lara, tell everybody about that.
I love our small group retreats. We keep it small and intimate so that you can get one-on-one feedback from Bill and myself on your work in progress, but it's a big enough group that you're also going to be getting feedback from the other people in the retreat. So you've got kind of a built-in support network there. We also will do craft sessions in the morning, and you're going to dictate what we talk about, what those teachings focus on to most help you advance your writer's career. So I hope you'll come and join us in Branson and take advantage of this.
Excellent. Well said. Let me also remind you that I am, in addition to being a podcast co-host, I am technically a writer. And my last book was Partners in Crime, but my next will be out in May. The next Daniel Pike book, that'll be the 8th in the series. Of course, he's a lawyer, and these are legal thrillers. And the new one will be titled Justice for All. Will Ben Kincaid be back like he was in the previous book? Yes, briefly. But another one of my series characters is this book's primary guest star, and it's not a team up. It's more like a cage match. And at that point, I'm just going to let you guess.
Will you please in the commercial for that book use something from Metallica's Justice for All album? I think that'd be
for you. I will. That'll be the background of the book trailer. Absolutely. So that's the title, but I'm going to make you wait for the guest star and what it's about. But watch for Justice for All. All right.
Am I also going to be in the video holding your book up in front of my naughty bits?
Would you? That's not creepy because we're married.
Yeah.
So that's a
yeah.
That's an acceptable way to promote your book, right? And I'll do the same when your next book comes out, honey.
Yes.
That'll sell
like
a
John
lot of
Cena
copies.
on the Oscars.
Yeah. Let's all pull a John Cena at the Oscars.
Well, not exactly the same, but okay. All right, everybody. Until next time, keep writing. And remember, you cannot fail if you refuse to quit. See you next time.